No real advantage to us. It's irrelevant to me. Canada would love it. Canada wants it. They need it because we don't need Canada product. That's the thing. You know, I want to be a nice person, but we don't need. I want to build the cars here, not in Canada.
Welcome back to a new episode of Conservative Corner with David Crayden and Nico Lagan. New time. New date, new day of the week, and so I'm so happy to welcome you back, Nico. It's always been so much fun doing this with you. I'm glad we're going to continue in 2026. And tonight we've got Jeff Rath joining us at the half-hour point to talk about Alberta independence. And I know you've talked to Jeff as well. And Jeff has frequently been on my other program to talk about where Alberta is with the independence movement. But I want to start off
Actually,
with China.
Let me correct you. I've never spoke to Jeff before.
Oh,
I'm
never.
Sorry. I know who he is. He has reposted some of my content about Alberta, but I have never spoken to him before.
Okay, I was misinformed.
That's okay.
I thought you had. Anyway, I'll meet
we'll
Jeff
change
tonight.
that today.
Virtually anyway.
Yep.
So, but I wanted to start off tonight with Mark Carney's trip to China, and I have to laugh because they're saying, a prime minister hasn't visited China in 2017.
2017.
Yeah, and everybody's forgetting to mention the fact that Mark Carney himself visited China in 2024. October 2024, when he was the chief financial advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He was working for the Prime Minister's office, and he was supposed to be in China talking fiscal policy about Canada. So what is Mark Carney up to? Well, he's meeting with the central bank, the Chinese central bank, and he secures a $276 $1 billion, or it's a quarter of $1 billion in Canadian dollar loan from the Chinese central bank, not for Canada, but for Brookfield Asset Management. And nobody's mentioning this at all. The last time he was in China, he brokered a deal for Brookfield Asset Management. Of course, as you know, everywhere Mark Carney goes, Brookfield is either not far behind or has been a few steps ahead of him. And here he is. He brings this turncoat Tory, this Michael Ma with him to Beijing. Thank God, I guess one of the other premiers in this country I really do have some admiration for is Scott Moe from Saskatchewan. And I'm glad he brought Scott Moe with him because it indicates to me that that there might actually be a deal in the making to lift these tariffs on canola oil, which is killing farmers in this country, because people don't understand canola is not some sort of luxury crop. It's the cash crop that can literally save a farm if everything else goes wrong. And a lot of farmers are getting by on canola. And to say that it really doesn't matter if there's a tariff on canola. And I'm so pissed off at Doug Ford, as usual, for saying, you got to keep those levies, those tariffs on electric vehicles. They've got a future in Ontario. There's no future for EVs in Ontario or anywhere else. I mean, it's not going to make a difference. This is a vanishing breed. So anyway, what are your thoughts about Mark Carney in China this week?
I've been talking about this a lot on my other show yesterday, and I did a lot of deep dive, and I got to tell you, what I found kind of blew my mind. So canola oil, because that's obviously what he's going to try to do, right? He's going to try to get canola oil's tariff removed. That's why Scott Moe's with him, the premier of Saskatchewan. But turns out that I'm just looking for the exact number to make sure I'm not lying here. But it turns out that China's not even our biggest customer when it comes to canola oil. The U.S. is. And we're looking at about our canola oil export altogether, the oil, the seed, or canola export. So the oil, the seeds, and the meal is worth about $14.5 billion a year. That's what it's worth. The U.S. buys 53% of it, 7.7 billion. China buys 40% of it at about $5 billion. And we know that the only bargaining chip that Carney has right now is the EV, is lifting the 100% EV tariffs that we have on China's EVs or lightweight vehicle. But remember that since being prime minister, since becoming or being selected as prime minister, he has put the 2035 EV mandates in Canada, which the biggest manufacturers in Canada cannot produce. That means that by the EV mandates, it means that by 2035, every single new lightweight vehicle sold in Canada must be EV. That is what the mandate wants. There is no way, shape, or form that our existing car manufacturing in Canada is able to do it. That's why most of those manufacturers, I don't know if you remember, but they signed the letter that they sent to Carney as in, what the fuck are you doing? You're literally going to kill us. And he needs, if he wants to meet that 2035 mandate, he needs China. Because China, I got to say, I don't know if you looked at their EVs, they're insane. Like, they're on a completely different level. They're probably the best EVs out there. I'm not saying I'd buy one. I'm very happy with my Ford truck. But if he wants to meet the 2035 EV mandate, he needs China. The problem is that we're looking at $14.5 billion that our canola is worth. They buy for about, what did I say, about $5 billion a year. Our EV market, if the mandates stick the way that they are predicted to, estimates are saying that our market just in Canada is going to be worth somewhere between $50 to $100 billion a year in order to meet those mandates. That is what the amount of money that the EV market is going to produce. And we cannot produce it with the products or the manufacturing that we have in Canada right now. And just for the people wondering, less than 10% of cars right now are sold in Canada or EVs. So that mandate is completely ridiculous. But that is why he's in China. He's in China to build a new world order. And those are not conspiracy theorists' words. Those are the words that he used 2 days ago to describe what he's trying to do with China. He also said that he's trying to build a new era for Canada and China. Yet he's spitting in the face of the U.S. that exports 76% of our exports, that buys 76% of our exports, and he's saying everywhere, oh, China is our second largest customer. 4%. That's the part that he doesn't say on any of his posts, is China buys 4% of our exports. But the thing to keep in mind, and this is where my head went yesterday because I was doing a deep dive. You've heard of the energy transition projects or transition agenda that's going on in order to meet the WEF 2050 net zero. That, for the people out there that might not know this, Mark Carney was on the board of trustees of the WEF when that piece of bullshit was written and publicly made available. In order to meet, let me ask you this: do you know how much that transition, that energy transition, is supposed to need when it comes to investment? How much investment is needed in order to make it a reality? The 2050, the WEF 2050 net zero agenda. Do you know how much money Canada would need to, air quote, invest to make it happen?
No, I don't.
The numbers don't make sense. We're talking over $2 trillion over the next 25 years. That's $7 billion a month for the next 25 years. Over $80 billion a year. Worldwide, it's estimated that it is going to be worth more than $100 trillion. Bloomberg estimated that it was just under 200 trillion, 199 trillion. And that's why he's there, because he's pushing his green agenda and he needs EVs in Canada. Another thing that is interesting is that you might not know this, but Brookfield's, one of their main focus of investment is green energy. One of the things that they do, and they do very well, is a concept called charging as a service. They build charging stations and they install them on their own property that they own, let's say like they did in California. So once again, Carney is trying to sign a deal that will completely decimate Canada the auto industry that's mostly in Ontario. So for once, I understand why Doughboy Ford is so pissed off at this. But Carney's trying to make Brookfield rich once again. But $2 trillion, that he is responsible for that piece of legislation. He was on the board of trustees.
But it's not going to make any, it's negligible though in sales of EVs, whether there's a tariff or no tariff. People do not want to buy electric vehicles.
The only reason that it makes sense is in order to meet the 2035 EV mandates. Because if the 2035 EV mandates wasn't on the table, it'd be irrelevant. You could remove those tariffs. Probably that the 10% might, some of that 10% might buy EVs from China. Because if you gave me a choice between EVs produced here in North America, even engineered in Germany, compared to what the Chinese are producing, is insane. Just the suspension that they have on their cars is absolutely next level. But nobody wants EVs in Canada. It's less than 10% of the market because they don't work half of the year because it's too freaking cold.
Well, exactly. Try to start one in February in Edmonton when it's minus 40 degrees Celsius. No,
ain't happening.
Not going to happen. But I agree with you 100% in terms of what this trip is all about. It's the New World Order. 100%. And Mark Carney has for years been advocating for China. He has said, there's a famous speech he made in 2019 where he talked about he wants the Chinese yuan to replace the US dollar as the global currency and the petrodollar. He wants China to be the engine, the global economic engine. He has been in China's pocket for so long, going over there, getting loans for Brookfield, advocating for China. Now he's got an MP who apparently has special status with the Chinese. And it's incredible to me because the Chinese are blatant about it. Here they are. China urges Canada to break from U.S. influence. Yeah, right. So easy. We're going to break from U.S. influence, even though it's our largest trading partner. We are its major ally. Our defense relationship is very, very strong. And we're going to break with the U.S. and what? Become China's ally? It's incredible. I found this paper today, though, Nico. It's quite interesting. National Security Strategy came out in November 2025. And this is what it's saying is that we must encourage Europe, Japan, Korea, Australia, Canada, Mexico, and other prominent nations in adopting trade policies that help rebalance China's economy towards household consumption, because Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East cannot alone absorb China's enormous excess capacity. So the U.S. is telling us exactly the opposite. Stop giving China this favored status that you love to have with it. And so Carney's in a difficult position. And a lot of people are saying, well, he's really between a rock and a hard place. That's exactly where he wants to be. Because Carney's not there for Canada's sake. He's there for Brookfield management's sake. He's there for Mark Carney's sake. And he's ultimately there for the globalist agenda. And I'm sure you would completely agree with that.
His main goal is to meet the 2050 WEF net zero agenda. That is his whole goal. Have you ever heard of this type of money of $100 trillion to $200 trillion required worldwide for investment? This is like a new gold rush. But people not only was he one of the trustees of the WEF board, but he was also the UN special envoy for climate change. He also wrote Values, his book that's all about climate change, all about how climate needs to be taken into consideration for every single financial decision made by a government, which is why he calls his word value, his book value as in currency. But what do we put value on as our economy? What do we choose to value as human beings? So his whole career seems to have been built on the back of green agenda because he knows how much money there is in it. And I don't think it matters at the end of the day if it's successful or not, because the money's in the transition. Is trying to get from point A, that is doing war on oil and gas, and B, becoming dependent on electricity, wind, however other technology you can use to produce it. God knows it's not nuclear, yet that's probably the cleanest type of energy, the most efficient type of energy that we can produce right now. But the point of the matter is that he works for the globalists. His whole agenda is to produce, to make it happen, to make the 2050 WEF green agenda a reality, or net zero a reality. And, don't forget, he is on the 17th. So he's visiting China. Then you know where he's going? He's going to Davos, Switzerland, to attend the annual WEF conference. He'll be there for 4 days. So this is not a conspiracy theory. That is his whole career. And he's still going as Prime Minister of Canada. And yet, as Canadians, people think it's business as usual, that it's totally normal.
Well, no, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy fact. He's been conspiring against Canadians in Canada for decades. And now, as we sort of get into Alberta here, I want to talk about this. This has been a story for me this week that has really got me angry. Really got me angry, because before Mark Carney boarded the jet to China, he stopped off in Prince Rupert, British Columbia, a city I'm fairly familiar with, having grown up on the West Coast. And he met with so-called Indigenous leaders. And this is incredible to me, because nobody questioned who these people were. I'll just play a bit of this.
How was the meeting? It was very good. It was very good. It was excellent. What did you guys discuss? We discussed many things. A lot about conservation, a lot about opportunities, partnership. We're still working on this, aren't we?
The tanker ban is not partisan legislation. It is the result of 50
Here, hold it there, Chief
years
Marilyn
of
Slett of the Coastal First Nations. First of all, Marilyn Slett is not a chief of any means or description, and the Coastal First Nations doesn't represent a single Indigenous person in BC. They're not a band. They're not a formation. They are an activist group that's funded by American woke interests, and it's been going on for a long time. I showed a great video on my program this morning that I did a story on when I was working for the Daily Caller, and it's Vivian Krause, who did an incredible amount of research about these so-called Indigenous groups on the west coast of Canada that were nothing more than activist groups funded by people like the Rockefeller Foundation and others to stop Alberta from producing oil.
Yep.
And it's amazing to me that nobody questioned her credentials. Nobody said, hold it now, what the hell is the Coastal First Nations? That's not a band. It's an activist group. And she's up there saying, not one step forward without our approval. And Mark Carney, apparently, and I found this absolutely astounding, Mark Carney agreed with this. Dan McTeague, my good friend Dan McTeague, who had on the show last week, retweeted this, or reposted this. Keith Wilson says, Carney confirmed today that he is setting aside the Constitution and granting First Nations a veto over interprovincial pipelines, despite clear court rulings to the contrary. Canada is broken, and the consequences to the economy will be severe. Dan reposts it and comments, if true, Canada will cease to exist as arbitrary decisions override law. Those who love Canada should be alarmed by the Liberals' willingness to cut a deal with a U.S. anti-oil charity that has no title and represents no tribe that Carney can grant such an unconstitutional commitment. This to me was absolutely astounding, because it indicates again, Mark Carney is not in the least bit serious about this pipeline. He's looking for any excuse to say, oh, I'm sorry, we can't do it. Now it's the Aboriginal people. They just don't want it. And here's another kicker that I really wish we had more time to go into this, but She goes on in this little diatribe news conference and says we're not going to allow the tankers to go up and down the West Coast because they might create an oil spill, and there's no scientific response for that. There are literally thousands of ships going up and down the West Coast, but they're U.S. ships. They're not Canadian.
That's okay. Yeah,
it is incredible, the hypocrisy going on and the psyops that are going on here, Nico. Like,
but
we really have a West Coast where there's no oil tankers at all, and it's absolute bullshit. What do you think?
But it's all done on purpose. It's 100% done on purpose. Because again, if you, I'm a sales engineer by trade. I built solution for customers, understanding what their goals are, and then you back engineer what their goals are, and you design that solution by back engineering the goal. If Mark Carney's goal is to make the 2050 WEF net zero agenda possible, he will do everything he can to stop the production of oil and gas. Not because he's not interested in it, is because he wants to take advantage of it later, for example, with China. So there's two things we need to keep in mind. Remember the MOU that Daniel Smith signed with Carney. Carney laughed. Daniel Smith exposed herself as being a globalist because in the MOU, the 2050 WEF net zero agenda is mentioned in there. There's a good reason why they're going to have $130 a ton provincial tax in Alberta, and they will start the Pathway carbon capture project at the same time. Now, if I don't know if you heard about this, I'm going to talk about it on my show right after this, but there is what was his name? I just need to look at what the name of the minister, Tim. He's with Mark Carney in China right now. Tim
Hodgson.
Yeah, Tim Hodgson. There you go.
Yeah.
Do you know that he announced today that our government signed 8 different MOUs with China today? Did you know that? 8 different ones. I found what they were. And one of them, the number one, is here is how it's described. So the number one MOU they signed is about energy cooperation, a renewed pact for cooperation on both clean energy and conventional energy, as in oil, LNG, and LPG. Crucially, this agreement recognizes that fossil fuels plays an important role in the short-term energy transition. Again, with that word energy transition. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's okay for the biggest polluter on the planet, a country that produces more pollution than Canada and the US combined, to buy oil and gas. So that is what Carney is going to do. He's going to make sure that we are not selling our oil and gas to the US, that we're going to keep it for China. That's what's happening right now. And what happened with Venezuela, what Trump did with Venezuela, is pretty much going to seal our deal when it comes to selling Alberta oil and gas to the Americans, because it ain't going to happen. They're going to get it cheaper. It's the same type of oil that we produce here in Alberta, or here in Canada, I mean Alberta. It's high sulfur, and Texas has all what they need, all the infrastructure to actually clean it. So, and I guarantee you that Venezuela oil is not going to have any tariffs on it. It's going to be taken at cost,
yeah,
and it's going to be sold to Americans very cheap. So Carney is aligning with China in order to build a new relationship, because he understands too, and that might be something people will not like to hear, but normally superpowers, their currency stays in power for about 80 years. That's what was with the UK when the US took over about 80 years ago. So now we're looking at the next superpower to become the world currency, and it will probably be China. If the US doesn't do something drastic, it will end up being China. And Mark Carney, let's get this straight. Mark Carney ain't an idiot. You can hate the guy, and I think he's one evil piece of shit, but he is not an idiot. That man is extremely intelligent, and that's what he's doing. He's making sure that he's aligning with China because he knows the money's going to come from China. They're the ones that's going to
Yeah.
control it. So as you were saying earlier, he wants their dollar to be the new world currency, and it's a matter of time before it happens. So everything that you're saying, everything I'm saying, all align, and they're all going to use what I said earlier, the energy transition, the WEF 2050 net zero agenda to make it happen, because this is going to go into individual carbon consumption. It's going to go into the 15-minute cities. There's a good reason why they want EV cars everywhere, because they want to limit how far you can go. They want to be able to shut them down. The whole thing is insane. If you're a conspiracy theorist like me, you start connecting the dots. You're like, it's not even a conspiracy. I can literally show you that everything that's happening right now, I can show you how it's going to happen. And it all starts with censorship. Next step, it's digital IDs. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think so. It was nice to see that the mandatory digital ID seems to be
In the UK?
arrested in the UK, and I think that's because of a lot of pushback from. I talked about that I guess about a week ago with Neil Oliver, who really thought there was a good possibility of stopping the mandatory digital IDs. So good on you, Neil. I know you led the fight in many ways, but I don't think Canada is going to be as aggressive. But
Well,
I wanted to say about
we got to be careful in Canada, though, because Alberta has a digital health card with a digital wallet that was introduced back in August by Daniel Smith. There's already one in BC, and Wab Kinew, the minister, the premier of Manitoba, announced his health ID this week, like his health digital ID. Quebec's working on it. They're rehauling their whole infrastructure. It's like a $3 billion project, and so is Ontario. So that fight is coming here, and it will be. And I make a prediction to you: the new Bill C-63, when it's tabled, will have a component of age verification to access social media. That will be how the federal government brings in the first digital ID on the Canadian level.
Yeah, I think so. See a comment here from Linda Winger. Psychopaths are not stupid. Linda, I hope you're talking about Mark Carney and not Nico and I.
Good point. Good point. Good point.
Digital BS. The comments are great tonight, but I think it's interesting. The whole thing with Venezuela, I'm not very highly supportive of this operation, by the way. And I share that with Tucker Carlson and my good friends at Redacted, who are all saying, what the hell happened to the Donald Trump of yesteryear? And here he is. Here's a few brief moments with Donald Trump before he thought it was a good idea to invade other countries and rebuild their infrastructure, because the U.S., God knows, needs a lot of help itself.
The world would be better off with Saddam Hussein
100%.
and Gaddafi in power.
100%. Now, as far as Assad is concerned,
What about the human rights abuses?
Let's talk. Well, you don't think they're happening now? They're worse now than they ever were. People are getting their heads chopped off. They're being drowned. Right now, they're far worse than they were ever under Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi. And it all blew up around Hillary Clinton and around Barack Obama. It all blew up. Now, one thing about Assad, not a good guy. I understand that. We have to rebuild our country. Our country's falling to pieces. We have $19 trillion in debt. We have infrastructure that's a disaster. Our roadways, our airports, our schools, everything.
So what's really now?
So, the infrastructure is still bad because Joe Biden's infrastructure bill had very little to do with infrastructure. Nothing really to do with roads and bridges. It was all pet projects for Biden's favorite Congress people, senators. And it was all about green energy programs that are now gone. So why isn't Donald Trump focusing on the U.S. infrastructure? Why is he invading Venezuela? I found this to be very problematic. And the argument that he was going down to stop the drug cartels in Venezuela, no, sorry.
That's a front. That's a front.
We haven't even heard them talk about. Have you noticed that? Not a word about drug cartels ever since the invasion, Maduro was brought to New York State, and it's all been about oil. So that's
if you look into it,
I
thought that's what you were going to show earlier, but you showed the report of their Security Council that took place in November. Did you look at the one that took place in December, the last one of 2025?
No, I didn't.
Trump brought back the Monroe Doctrine. So I don't know if you're aware, if you know what the Monroe Doctrine is, but put super simply, in 1823, the President Monroe put a doctrine in place to try to prevent the old colonizers, so the old Europe, to come to South and North America and establish new colonies. So he put a document together just saying, guys, you stay over there. This is now ours. We will take over the whole hemisphere. They didn't have the military power to do it back then, but at the beginning of the 20th century, I can't remember what the name of the president is, but he put some corollaries, in place,
Yes,
just amendment to the O's law.
I'm actually an expert on this one, Nico.
Well, okay, perfect.
It's the Roosevelt corollary.
You're absolutely right.
That is what Trump is doing. It's not the Monroe Doctrine. The Monroe Doctrine.
They're calling it Dunroe to make fun of Donald Trump, right?
Because it's the Roosevelt corollary that says, okay, if the Western Hemisphere is ours, we have a right to act as the regional policeman. That's something Theodore Roosevelt started. And Donald Trump has really ignited things with this latest. So,
if you look at his politics, he's been leaving China alone, as in he's saying to China, don't come here, but do whatever it is that you do in Asia. You can keep Asia, we don't care. He kind of aligned with Russia, making it clear that if he had to pick a side between Ukraine and Russia, he'd take Russia. So he's basically saying to Russia, Eurasia belongs to you. We don't care about Eurasia. But now with bringing back the Monroe Doctrine with the corollaries from Roosevelt, he's basically saying the Western Hemisphere belongs to us, as in the U.S. That's why he felt he could invade Venezuela. That's why he's talking about taking Greenland. And I guarantee you that the next thing he's going to do is come for Canada's the Northwest Passage, because he can use that to cut trade from China to Europe, because it cuts about 7,000 kilometers on their trip between China to Europe. So Trump is playing, he's love or hate the guy, he is definitely moving the needle. He doesn't believe in status quo. And who's going to stop him? Because that's the idea, right? China's going to
they're going back to a spheres of influence idea.
Yes.
And
yep.
And, which was popular during the Cold War. If you want to do that, that's great, but be consistent about it. Anyway, Jeff Rath, I want to welcome you to the show. No stranger. And I want to introduce you to Nico Lagan. And this is Jeff Rath, the counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Project.
I know who Jeff is. Yep. What's going on, Jeff?
So, Jeff, I wanted to get started. I just got off redacted, and I heard Clayton Morris say, hard to believe, but I sure hope it comes to pass, when we talked about Alberta independence. And you've definitely got some friends there. And I think they're going to have you on in the next couple of weeks to talk about this, because they weren't even aware that you had been down to Washington, and the Alberta Prosperity Project had sent delegates down to Washington to talk with senior Trump administration officials about how they would view an independent Alberta, and how that independent Alberta could potentially at some time become the 51st state. But I said, hey, it's all being viewed by the Trump administration in a very positive way. And I must say, a lot of Americans aren't even aware of that.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I need to correct you, because we are not discussing Alberta ever becoming the 51st state. In fact, our conversations have been the opposite of that, because the Trump administration is well aware of the fact that the Democrats in the Senate will never allow Alberta, which would be a Republican state, to join the U.S. So our discussions are strictly about a free and independent Alberta and the nature of a relationship between a free and independent Alberta and the United States of America in what would become a common market between Alberta and the U.S. with zero tariffs on both sides of the border, free flow of goods and people back and forth across, the Alberta-U.S. border, an enhanced economic relationship, it's a military alliance, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the types of things that we're discussing in a hypothetical sense to determine whether the United States would be open to those things. And I have to say the response we've gotten, or that we've received, is extremely enthusiastic.
Yeah, can I ask you something, Jeff? Because I heard behind the grapevines, because I know a lot of people that know you and that know what you guys are doing. Can you confirm that also one of the things you were looking to get from the U.S. is to be recognized as a country? Because
Yeah,
when
of
you
course.
separate from a country, you need 2 or 3 countries worldwide to say we
Yeah, of
recognize you
course.
as a country.
Yeah, no, of course that would be part of our discussions, right? And again, but we're private citizens. They won't, we can't get we can't enter into any formal agreements with the United States or whatever. But obviously, we would be over the moon if immediately upon a successful referendum in Alberta that the United States recognized Alberta as a free and independent country, along with Israel, Argentina, Hungary, some other countries around the world that are very like-minded to our way of thinking. That would certainly enhance our negotiation status. Sitting down to talking about our divorce with Canada, right? Knowing full well at that point that with that kind of recognition, especially from the United States, that we would have a much stronger position at the negotiating table. And of course the other thing, and this will be the next series of meetings that we're going to be having in the U.S., is we're doing a feasibility study on and meeting with the U.S., hopefully meeting with the U.S. Treasury, J.P. Morgan, Goldman's, whoever, about putting in place, what would amount to a $500 billion U.S. Credit facility that could be triggered immediately upon a successful referendum vote, so that when we're at the negotiating table with Canada, they can't threaten to cut off transfers and mess around with us economically, because, if we had access to those kinds of dollars, it's like, sure, threaten to cut off people's pensions. We have $500 billion US that we can draw on, and we can pay everybody's pensions in US dollars, in US dollars at par, and everybody will be happier. So, we want to make sure that every threat that Ottawa can levy against a free and independent Alberta becomes as hollow and meaningless as we believe that they are.
I think I made the point with Clayton this afternoon that given what you've said, and you've stated quite clearly in your economic policy paper, that you would be a nation as prosperous as Kuwait. I mean, Clayton was saying Norway. I'm saying no, as prosperous as Kuwait. Why would you want to join the United States?
Well, that's the whole issue. And we've actually done the analysis and looked at it. If you look at the population of Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, all these places, they have a lot more people than Alberta does, right? I mean, we're only, 4.5 million people. Once we get rid of all the people that are here on temporary foreign worker visas and international mobility program visas. And I apologize for this, David, but when we send them all on airplanes back to Ottawa, right? We'll only have 4.5 million people in Alberta. And if you look at that, Albertans literally will have the most barrels of oil per capita of any country in the world. I mean, we're sitting on the world's third largest oil reserve, and we only have 4.5 million people here. So if Saudi Arabia, with multiples of our population, can have zero income tax, Dubai can have zero income tax, Qatar, all those countries have zero income tax. Why can't Alberta have zero income tax, right? That's what we're looking for. Is we want Alberta to become the lowest taxed, lowest regulated jurisdiction, in North America. And of course, you and I were chatting offline the other day about Venezuela and what does it mean and blah, blah, blah. For Alberta, independence becomes a necessity in the face of the Venezuelan oil reserves coming online, because the only way that we can get rid of all of the federal regulations and make Alberta oil competitive on the world market is to get rid of Ottawa. Ottawa has literally added, everybody talks about the Midwestern hub adding $15, stealing $15 a barrel from Albertans. Well, there's another $15 a barrel that nobody talks about, which is the $15 a barrel that Ottawa is stealing from Albertans in the face of all of the ridiculous regulations. We get rid of all the federal regulations, carbon tax, excise tax, income tax, etc. We can get the cost of production of Alberta oil down by another $10 or $15 a barrel. So we become, competitive on the global, much more competitive on the global market. So, that's, in part what we're looking forward to, as a free and independent country.
Yeah, I think it's important. We had a comment here, but Carney is making deals with China right now, and China will be the largest investor in the oil sands, hence controlling it. Then what? Do you see that?
Well, but again, a free and independent Alberta will be making our own laws, Mr. Carney. Thank you very much. And and this is something that Albertans are waking up to, is that China right now is making a big move into oil and gas development in northeastern British Columbia and Alberta. And when you talk about why it is that Alberta oil has been shut in by the communist NGOs from the United States, by the communists in Ottawa, including, somebody published the names of all of the communist Chinese controlled members of parliament in the Liberal Party the other day, right? Those two RCMP guys that leaked that information, right? So, the communist controlled Chinese Liberal Party, they have shut in the oil and gas in Alberta so that we don't have pipelines that can now supply Japan and Korea, because China doesn't want Japan and Korea being supplied with a steady, stable supply of oil from Alberta. When Japan came to Canada and said, hey, we want to talk about a long-term stable supply deal for liquid natural gas from Alberta, Trudeau's response was, oh no, there's no business case for that. There's no business case, right? Well, what he meant was the business case of the Chinese is to lock in Alberta oil and gas until they can fill all of the pipelines with oil and gas entirely controlled by Chinese companies, so that the oil and gas only goes to China, and then there'll be a business case. So to the extent that Carney is now promising the so-called Coastal First Nations NGO, which again, funded by American NGOs, which are funded by Soros on behalf of the communist Chinese, right? The reason Carney's promising them that there'll be a First Nations veto over pipelines through British Columbia is to continue to keep oil and gas in Alberta shut in Alberta until such time as the Chinese are ready to take it. And then you watch Carney and Chairman Xi run over the First Nations of British Columbia like they don't exist. Do you think China gave any care whatsoever about the indigenous people of Venezuela? They don't care about the indigenous people of Canada. They're just pawns on a chessboard. And the minute the minute they're become too much of an impediment, Carney and the Chinese will just brush them aside like they don't exist. Full federal jurisdiction over pipelines will be asserted, and China will have a pipeline directly from the Alberta oil fields, directly to the refineries in Shanghai and Shenzhen and wherever they're refining heavy oil. So that's what's going on. And anybody that doesn't think that that's what's happening, it's only because they're not paying attention.
Go ahead, Nico, if you want to jump in here.
Yeah, what I was going to say, it seems like the only, at least from my perspective, I'm a French guy from Quebec that's been paying a lot of attention to Alberta, because God knows you guys deserve to leave. After 10 years of abuse, you guys deserve to leave and just be independent. But correct me if I'm wrong, if you do get your independence, BC, and you're recognized as an independent country, BC would need to give you access to the water, right? As per UN status, if I'm not... Because that would allow you to build the pipelines that you want. That would allow you to have the tankers to sell it to other customers than just the U.S. It's like a win-win-win solution for you guys.
And other customers besides communist China, which is what Carney has envisioned, right? But
of course,
and that's the UN access to the law of the sea treaty, right?
Exactly.
But we've already had discussions with the U.S. and they're enthusiastic about a pipeline coming from Alberta through Idaho or Montana, Idaho, Washington, or Oregon to the Pacific coast. And they would fully support it at the federal level because they see Korea and Japan as being a very important part of the American alliances globally. And they would have no issue whatsoever with Alberta oil flowing through the U.S. to service those markets. The other thing is, forget the law of the sea treaty. Let's look at it from a perspective of pure leverage, okay? Right now, Alberta has no leverage with British Columbia because jurisdiction over pipelines is firmly in the hands of Marxist Carney, who's in bed with the Chinese. We've already discussed how our oil isn't going to move until Chairman Xi says it's going to move, right? And gives Carney, the instruction to do it, right? But imagine a free and independent Alberta, right? And we turn to BC and we say, okay, British Columbia, we're an independent country, and 70% of your goods flow east to Ontario out of Vancouver ports. Now, as you may know, Alberta is a rat-free jurisdiction. We want to keep it that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop every train going through Alberta at the border and inspect it for rats. We're going to stop every truck at the border, make sure there's no rats on board. This rat inspection could take 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, right? And while we're, all those goods are sitting there piling up at the, at the border, we're going to have our customs inspectors go on board. We're going to value the goods on board. We're going to put a throughput tariff on all of those goods, right? Or you can give us a pipeline. Take your pick, right? It's that simple. Alberta as an independent country. BC becomes landlocked, in that circumstance, right? All of the goods that are imported to BC will be stuck in BC unless they come to an agreement with Alberta over a pipeline. That's how things work in the real world. And if you've got leverage, you can get deals done. Right now, Alberta has no leverage because we're stuck in this dysfunctional relationship with Ottawa where, we have, twice the population of the Maritimes, but only 6 senators to their 30. We have twice the population of the Maritimes, but like half of their, basically half of their members of parliament. We only have 2, all of Western Canada only has 2 seats on the Supreme Court. So no wonder they rule the way they rule on division of powers issues, et cetera, right? All of that goes away when Alberta votes itself out of Canada. And if anybody's been looking at all of the wonderful pictures of my fellow Albertans that I am so proud of, lining up into the dark January nights beyond the vision of the cameras, like literally some of these lines to get into the signing halls are almost a kilometer long. I mean, it's crazy, right? And we are on the cusp of something really exciting. And I have to tell you, like all of the political, all of the politicians in Alberta are quivering now in fear of the beast that has arisen in this province in terms of an angry population that wants Alberta out of Canada and will not let any politician in this province stop it, right? It's amazing what's going on right now. Like I've been going to these rooms and speaking to these rooms and watching the lineups. I mean, every small town we go to, we instantly double or triple the population of that town with every event. People coming in from every surrounding farm. I mean, every surrounding, us hamlet in town, packing these halls, lining up around the block to sign. They're actually, what they're calling it is the Alberta Declaration of Independence petition. And everybody wants to sign. Grandparents, parents, kids, whole families, 3 generations at a time coming in to sign. I'm telling you, it warms my heart. I've never seen anything like it. And anybody in politics in Alberta that's been around politics, any period of time, nobody in this province has seen a political movement like it.
Wow. Well, you anticipated my question. I was going to say the crowds are phenomenal. We saw some footage from Red Deer, the Clayton show this afternoon. I've posted a number of these clips on my X page and shown them on social media. So the enthusiasm is tremendous. It's obvious to see. Can you, at this stage in the game, anticipate what the referendum question is going to be?
Oh, we already have it. I mean, we've already, that's what the petition's about. The petition is to ask people if they want a referendum over the following question. The question is, do you agree that the province of Alberta, right, shall cease to be part of Canada to become an independent state? So what we did was we took the exact wording of Section 1, Sub 3 of the Clarity Act, right, so that there's no quibbling over whether or not it's a clear question. And that is the referendum question that literally hundreds of thousands of Albertans are lining up to sign as the question that they want put on a referendum ballot to vote Alberta out of Canada.
Okay, it wasn't clear to me that was going to be the actual referendum.
That is the question. And the referendum, the referendum petition clearly references that question. And that's the question that everybody is signing their name next to that they want to have on a ballot this fall.
That's tremendous. Well, I know you have to get going soon, but the final question here to Nico.
Yeah, I got a question for you because I don't know if you're following Quebec politics, but they're also like the government right now. We're going to have the government leader just stepped away, so they're going to have to find a new leader in Quebec. But they're losing by about 20 points.
His name is Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon.
Wow! So you know your Quebec politics. So let me ask you this: do you think that the Quebec electing an openly separatist government, because that's who's leading in the race for the election this year, is going to help Alberta?
Well, Nico, this may be a shock to you, but Paul St. Pierre Plamondon and I have actually become very good friends. We met in Calgary. We had a nice 4-hour meeting. Paul, Dennis Baudry, Dennis Sylvester, myself and people on his team. We had a really, really lovely dinner one night at the Palliser Hotel for about 4 hours over a couple bottles of wine. Had a really, really nice chat about our common interests and what we could do together moving forward, right? And I've actually been invited to the annual general meeting of the Parti Québécois in January in Saint-Hyacinthe, and I think I'll be coming to, out of interest and to watch what's going on and to practice my French parce que j'ai besoin de pratique, parce que je parle pas aussi couramment qu'avant, donc j'ai besoin de venir à Québec. But so I'm looking forward to it. And obviously we're in very close ties with them. And the big takeaway for everybody, because it's going to completely change the dynamic of the constitutional negotiations in Canada, Paul St. Pierre Plamondon has promised us that a Parti Québécois government will support and endorse Alberta independence at the constitutional negotiation table. It completely changes the framework of the Canadian negotiation.
I knew it. I had a feeling that you were involved somehow. I didn't have any proof, but there it is. But yeah, it's definitely going to be 2026 is going to be very interesting.
It's exciting, right? I mean, I was saying to somebody a while ago, I said, how often in somebody's life do they actually have a realistic possibility of being involved in creating a new country? I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's so exciting. And I have to tell you, every night that I go out now to these events and I see, literally thousands and thousands of my fellow Albertans so excited. And a lot of them, it's like kind of this steely look on their face and this determination that this is going to happen. Like there's no putting this back in the bottle, right? Everybody understands that this is going to be, this could be our last chance to get it done because, of course, they're doing everything they can, to destroy our movement, to flood our population with, flood our province with, people from the third world, who are literally being given more money than our pensioners, to come to our country and live in our communities and make rents unaffordable for our children and take our kids' jobs and all the rest of it. So, a lot of us feel that this is the last chance that we're going to have to be able to vote Alberta out of Canada and to become an independent country. So people are determined to make this happen.
Well, I think as I said this afternoon, I've watched independence movements ebb and flow over the years, not just in Alberta, but for Western Canada. And it was always sort of seen as a fringe movement, something that was not going to happen. But as you're saying today, and I confirm this looking at the polls, 45% in many cases and higher of Albertans are now saying they want an independent Alberta. I find that to be incredible. I don't think that knowledge has sunk into the legacy media or the federal politicians, how close this is. But as you said, this is, I think, an opportunity that many Albertans are going to grasp, and it potentially is going to go their way.
Well, see, and just the other week, and I'm glad you brought up the polls, just the other week, CBC was calling me about some phony Liberal poll that had support for independence in Alberta at 19%. And it's like, oh, why are you spending all your time on this? Only 19% of Albertans favor independence. And I just laughed. I said, that poll's a fraud. The ground. I said, the numbers that we're seeing are in excess of 45%. And, to quote, my new friend, Paul St. Pierre Plamondon, when they started the PQ referendum campaign in 95, before, that resulted in a 49 point whatever, almost a 50% vote that were taking Quebec out of Canada, they started that referendum campaign at 30%, right? And keep in mind, we're only in week 2 of the petition process. And that's what the numbers have done, as other Albertans see the determination of their fellow citizens to support a free and independent Alberta, right? It's now become literally the national conversation of the country of Alberta is when can we get the hell out of Canada, right? And it's become, everybody's talking about it. Everybody's paying attention to it. Everybody, or most people are looking at it positively. So by the time we finish this petition process and hopefully have our 1 million+ signatures, which is our goal, right? We are going to go into a referendum campaign with in excess of 50% of the population in favor of independence in the polls. Just mark my words. You can have me back on May 6th, and we can see where the polls are at after we turn in our 1 million signatures. And I can guarantee you that, or promise you that we're going to be either close to 50% or over 50% by the time that our petition drive is over.
Well, I will have you back on, as I always do, Jeff, and we'll be continuing to talk. And I know you've got a Zoom call to get to, so I will.
I know, other duty calls.
You know.
But hey, Nico, c'était un vrai plaisir. Merci beaucoup. Hein? Salut.
En français, j'adore.
Yeah.
C'était vraiment bien de te rencontrer. On va se reparler. On va se
Okay,
reparler.
no,
ça.
c'est parfait. David,
No extra charge,
je vais
folks.
donner mon numéro de téléphone. Okay, merci.
Parfait. Bonne journée.
Okay, salut.
Well, thank you for sharing your time with us tonight, Jeff, and we'll keep talking. Bye
You
for
bet,
now.
David. Always a pleasure. All right, over now.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
Well, in the remaining few minutes here, and we only have about 4 minutes left, but I was waiting in line on Redacted this afternoon. The woman in front of me was named Marilyn Z, and she was talking about how Australia is introducing its own Online Harms Act and has introduced it, and they're voting on it. And most of the parties are saying it doesn't go far enough. Yep. And here we are, less than 10 days away now before Parliament resumes. I've been told, the people I've been talking to, that the Online Harms Act will be renamed the Online Safety Act, and it will be one of the first orders of business for first reading. And Nico, what can we do as Canadians to stop not only this one, but C9, C8? Do you think there's any hope for this country?
No. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I just hope. I think those bills are going to pass. I think Bill C2, C8, C9, C12, C16, and C63, the new version, is going to pass, unfortunately. I just hope that what comes out of it, like the 13,000 arrests a year like we're seeing in the UK, is going to come here. Same thing as Australia. Australia's on that path now. They've put some groups together that will actively look at hate speech online and arrest people. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get better yet. I just hope that, like the UK, we wake up before the digital ID. Because this is the part in my head that's the line in the sand that we cannot cross. But the average Canadian needs to see more bad before they actually wake up. They need to see their parents, themselves, their friends get arrested for posts that they made online, just like we're seeing in the UK. And that's what triggered everything, right? It's really the arrests. And we're talking 13,000 arrests in 2023, 13,000 in 2024. We don't know the numbers for 2025 yet, but this is what seems to be waking up people. And hopefully, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong on this one. I hope those bills don't pass, but unfortunately, I think they're going to pass because they almost have a majority now. And the Conservatives, even if they all voted against them, the NDP's in favor of them, and so's the Bloc. So I think we're screwed. But hopefully it wakes up. It's going to wake up Canadians to what those bills actually mean.
Well, I tend to agree with you on things not getting better. My last conversation with Neil Oliver, I said, Neil, do you think we've got a chance to beat this? And he said it's like hearing something in your engine. You know there's something wrong, but you just have to wait and find out exactly what is making the noise. And he said it's like that with freedom sometimes in a country. You don't realize how bad it is until you find out how bad it is. And I think that's where we might have to go. We might have to lose more of our freedom before we realize we have to fight hard to get it back. And that's not where I want to be, but I'm going to be on the right side of history, just as I was in the Freedom Convoy, just as I was with Katie and the ostrich farm. I was on the right side of history. I'm going to be on the right side of free speech in this battle, and I know you will be too. And we're going to continue to fight this battle in every way we can.
Amen. Amen to that.
So, Nico, thank you for joining me. This is our first show of 2026. We're going to continue for those of you who joined us tonight, and the numbers look pretty good. Nobody was really expecting this today. The numbers not bad. We're going to be doing this every week, Thursday. Well, maybe occasionally one of us has to bow out, but every week, Thursdays at 6 o'clock Eastern time. Join us for Conservative Corner. Nico, I love talking to you. I'm glad we're going to keep doing this, and let's do it every week.
Absolutely. Right back at you, David.
So we'll see you next week, and Godspeed, and thanks for the work you're doing.
Yeah, right back at you, David.
Okay. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us.